Our top story tonight on Bottomline East Africa is about the diplomatic row between Somalia and Kenya. The government has written, that's the government of Somalia, has written a protest letter to Kenya demanding an explanation for the detention of a Somalia government delegation en route to Turkey. The delegation, led by Prime Minister Omar Sharmake, included 4 members of parliament. Trix Ingado reports.
This is the latest in a series of diplomatic tensions between the Somalian and Kenyan governments after the latter detained a Somali government delegation of over 20 officials, including 4 ministers, following accusations that their chartered plane breached protocol. In a protest letter to the Kenyan government, Somalia demanded an explanation for the detention, making reference to an agreement between the federal government of Somalia and the Kenyan government that exempts flights carrying Somalian leaders from a stopover in Wajir, which is standard protocol. The detention of some members of the delegation en route to Istanbul, Turkey for a high-level partnership forum is said to have delayed Prime Minister Omar Abdirashid Ali Sharmake, also part of the team. The strongly worded letter further said, and I quote, "The federal government of Somalia protests the unwarranted incident at JKIA and expects full justification and explanation from Kenya of what transpired soonest." Meanwhile, the federal government of Somalia will deliberate on what could be a response. Somalia and Kenya have enjoyed years of close and constructive diplomatic relations, working jointly on various projects aimed at helping Somalia, that is still reeling from decades of civil conflict, find its water legs. However, this is not the first diplomatic spat between the two neighbors. Somalia has dragged Kenya to an international court where it is demanding the international borders be redrawn to grant it most of the Kenyan coastline, a matter the ICC is yet to make a ruling on. The Somali government has also recently called for the departure of Kenyan troops from Somalia by 2017 as part of an agreement under the African Union Mission in Somalia Treaty. Somali Foreign Affairs Minister Abdisalan Omar has in the past said that the troops have stabilized the war-torn country since their incursion in 2011 to help the Somali government fight off Al-Shabaab. Security checks in Wajir are made relevant owing to various threats from across the border. Earlier this month, a bomb was smuggled onto a plane in Mogadishu airport. The bomb exploded mid-air, killing its carrier. Trix Ingado, KTN News.
Human rights watchdog has accused the Democratic Republic of Congo authorities of arbitrarily arresting 8 youth activists. The activists and at least 30 political opposition supporters were detained on or around the 16th of February in connection with last week's national strike called by the opposition to protest delays in organizing presidential elections. Here's Lillian Odera with more on that report.
Human Rights Watch says at about 4:30 a.m. on February 16th, in the eastern city of Goma, police entered the office of an organization where youth activists had been working through the night, preparing banners for the national strike. One of the banners read, "In 2016, we won the African Nations Football Championships. We can also win democracy." The police arrested Rebecca Kavungo, Saje Kivu, Justin Kambale, John Anipenda, Ghislaine Muhiwa, and Melka Kamundu, all members of the Struggle for Change. The 6 were taken to the P2 police station in Goma, where they were questioned without a lawyer present. The police also confiscated 2 laptops, 6 cell phones, and the banners. Human Rights Watch says one of the activists has a deep cut on his upper arm when its officers visited them in detention. Senior Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch, Ida Sawyer, says in a statement that peaceful protest is not a crime and the Congolese authorities should immediately release all those wrongfully arrested or detained on trumped-up charges. She goes on to say that these latest arrests are part of a growing crackdown on opponents of the government's attempt to delay elections and extend president's term in office. The Lucha activists told Human Rights Watch they believe the police have been closely monitoring their activities since at least November 2015, when security officials brutally repressed a peaceful demonstration the movement organized in Goma. During that demonstration, 2 Lucha activists and 7 other people were arrested. They remained in detention to date. Soya says concerned governments should press Congo to immediately free the peaceful protesters it's holding and end its political repression. On Tuesday last week, a one-day general strike in the Democratic Republic of Congo paralyzed the economic activity in the capital in a bid to pressure President Joseph Kabila to quit power when his mandate ends in December. Traffic on the normally bustling streets was greatly reduced, save for the few shared taxis ferrying much of Kinshasa's workforce. The central market was largely empty and most shops in the business district were closed.
In my opinion, we should wait until November when Kabila finishes his mandate to do all of this. It is at that moment that we must put pressure. For now, let us work. His term ends in December, so we need to let him do his job.
The constitution bars Kabila from standing again in elections slated for November, but critics fear he wants to change the law or delay the poll to retain power. Kabila came to power when his father was assassinated in 2001. He won elections in 2006 and 2011 that the opposition says were rigged. The duration of his tenure has raised tension in a country that has never known a peaceful handover of power. More than 40 died in a police crackdown on protests in January 2015. Lilian Odera, KTN News.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has expressed concern about the tense post-electoral situation in Uganda following the presidential elections in which President Yoweri Museveni won a 5th term of office. The election has been marred by sporadic violence and opposition allegations of electoral fraud, with Museveni's main rival, Kizza Besigye, being arrested several times.
The United Nations Human Rights Office says it is concerned about the tense post-election situation in Uganda following the arrests of opposition leaders and the deployment of heavy military and police forces in the streets of Kampala. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights spokesperson Cecile Puili told a news briefing in Geneva about the intimidating display of force used this past Friday by Ugandan police and military forces to evacuate the Forum for Democratic Change (FDC) headquarters in Kampala, with tear gas and live ammunition reportedly used.
No, you bring him. Push him inside.
The office has also expressed concern over information of journalists being harassed and intimidated by security forces.
We are concerned by the tense post-electoral situation in Uganda, with reports of at least 2 people killed and an unknown number of people injured. Heavy military and police forces deployed in the streets of Kampala, and the arrest of 4 opposition leaders since Thursday's elections.
According to foreign observers, the poll was conducted in an atmosphere of fear and intimidation, and the opposition has rejected it as fraudulent. The main opposition leader in Uganda, Kizza Besigye of the FDC, has rejected the result. He was arrested and released on 4 different occasions in a week and was placed under house arrest on Saturday without charge or judicial order. President Yoweri Museveni, in power for 30 years, received nearly 61% of the votes, with Besigye taking 35%.
2 other presidential candidates have also been reportedly arrested over the last few days. Mr. Mbabazi from the Go Forward party has been under house arrest since Saturday, and Mr. Abed Mbwanika, president of the People's Development Party, was reportedly intercepted by police on Friday at Mutukula, close to the border with Tanzania, as he was attempting to leave the country with his family. Kampala's Lord Mayor Erias Lukwago was also arrested on Saturday as he was talking to the press about Mr. Besigye's arrest.
Museveni has presided over strong economic growth, but is accused at home and abroad of repression, dissent, and failing to tackle rampant corruption. Critics say he wants to rule for life, emulating other African leaders who refuse to give up power. Mark Namaswa, KTN News.
Let's go to South Sudan. Troops allied with Riek Machar, the former rebel leader and rival to President Salva Kiir, will deploy to the capital in March. It will be the first time Machar-allied troops will be deployed in Juba since December 2013, when a row between Kiir and his sacked deputy quickly descended into a civil war that often ran along ethnic lines. Both sides, under pressure from Washington, the United Nations and other powers, signed an initial peace deal in August and agreed to share out ministerial positions in January. But that deal has broken down repeatedly, and a UN report last month said both leaders qualified for sanctions over atrocities in the conflict. However, earlier this month, Kiir gave Machar his old job back as deputy leader, raising hopes of a breakthrough after months of troubled negotiations and failed ceasefire agreements. Still in South Sudan, after fighting broke out between youth from two communities last week, killing 18 people, peace within the region has returned. A semblance of normalcy has returned to the UN-administered protection of civilian site in Malakal, South Sudan, which shelters about 47,000 displaced civilians. The UN hosts about 200,000 people who live in 6 UN bases throughout the country.
The situation at the United Nations Protection of Civilians site in Malakal, South Sudan is now calm. Peacekeepers have now intensified their patrols around the perimeter of the site and secured specific areas in the vicinity of the UN base.
The condition we're living in is very difficult because we're just lying to ourselves that there is peace and a peace agreement that has been signed, but unfortunate things are happening. If there's real peace in people's hearts, there's no reason for this fighting to happen. Civilians are killed, victimized and displaced. This is difficult.
The fighting of one of the UN compounds started among youth between Shilluk and Dinka communities using small arms, machetes and other weapons, and was further compounded by shooting coming from outside. Doctors Without Borders say it has been treating people wounded in the fighting, including at least 25 with gunshot wounds.
UN should exert effort now to see the immediate needs of these citizens. Fences are open all around the camp, which need mending. The health of people here has deteriorated. Consider the health of these people. Look into the food and water supply for these people and see where they can be settled.
South Sudan descended into civil war in December 2013 when a row between President Salva Kiir and his sacked deputy Riek Machar. Kiir and Machar signed an accord last August to end the conflict that has killed over 10,000 people. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is due to travel to South Sudan's capital Juba this week to meet with President Salva Kiir. Zinzi Kibiku, KTN News.
The Burundian opposition in the diaspora has criticized President Pierre Nkurunziza's announcement Tuesday that he is ready to hold talks with the country's opposition. According to the National Council for the Respect of the Arusha Agreement and the Rule of Law in Burundi, the president's announcement is, quote, false. Chairman of the opposition coalition based in the diaspora, Leonard Nyangoma, explained to the AFP that, quote, it is a false move because the de facto president told the UN Secretary General that he accepts inclusive dialogue, end of quote, yet turns around to accuse people of disturbing the peace. The United Nations Security General Ban Ki-moon was in Burundi on Monday for talks with the Burundian leader who has rejected a peacekeeping force from the African Union. After meeting with Mr. Nkurunziza on Tuesday, Ban Ki-moon told the press that the Burundian leader had agreed to talks with the opposition. President Nkurunziza, who confirmed his desire for the talks, added that he had shown commitment to the announcement to free 2,000 prisoners, excluding those accused of disturbing the peace.